Hi everyone, welcome to our first week's lecture that kind of introduces you to sound art. This lecture will be made in 3 parts, and I'll note when to go to each part through the lecture. And it'll be obvious because there'll be 3 separate videos. I wanted to kind of first talk about what sound art is. And sound art is really interesting, and sound art as a label is kind of contested because sound really kind of integrates with lots of different practices like sound art installation, etc. And I'll talk about the differences between sound and music in a minute. But I want to highlight the fact that sound is rather than about seeing. So when you look at a painting, you look at it from a kind of distant perspective, right? You can stand stationary and kind of look at a painting. A painting can also kind of travel through images online and you can kind of access it. But sound happens in a particular time, in a particular place, and is experienced through the senses. So it's not about the ocular, it's about the acoustic or the sonic. And so that is kind of felt and sensed in the body. And you'll know this, and I hope that in the kind of first week we could kind of practice, or you can kind of practice listening. Like, what does it mean to listen in an attuned way when you're walking and listening to, car honks, the sounds in the kitchen, and really kind of listening to those sounds. There's a relationship between your body, your sensing body, and the sound in that moment. So sound is located in time, place, and the body. So let's go over the differences between music and sound. Firstly, trying to separate these 2 categories is really impossible because you'll see right away that, experimental music or concrete music can be kind of understood through a sound art context. But just for the sake of the course, let's kind of define the outlining characteristics of sound. So I wanted to outline kind of 4 characteristics of sound. Firstly, the difference between sound and music, slightly, and this is a kind of slippery difference, is that it has a really kind of specific lineage and history grounded in the early inventions in the 1900s that we'll talk about, and then, fully kind of contextualized in the 60s and 70s in Fluxus, Futurism, and modernist movements. So that's when sound art really kind of coheres as like a genre. The second is it's connected to a critical engagement with how sound and noise is perceived in the world and through the body. So when we think about Cardi B's new WAP, video, that's music. You could break that down as sound and start to kind of really recontextualize it, but that is music. Sound is, really being critical of, what sounds are, breaking them down and creating something new from that. The third is that it's not sound and sound art, sound installation, etc., is not necessarily harmonious, tonal, compositionally organized, or pleasing. Like, a lot of sound art is really difficult to listen to, and the first example that I'll show today, you'll find that. So I'll only show a little bit of it. The fourth is that it's connected to other practices, again, such as sculpture, installation, performance, painting, and it usually happens within a kind of gallery context or a concert hall context that is for experimental music or sound. So I think it's important to give a kind of brief prehistory that really paved the way to how kind of sound art developed in the 60s and 70s. So let's begin with Thomas Edison. So here we are. Hi, Thomas Edison. And his development of the phonograph. So while he was working on improvements to the telegraph and telephone, he figured out a way to record sound, and he used 2 needles, one for recording, one for playback. So this really changed how sound was interpreted, because before, in the production of music, typically there are, musical instruments like a violin, and those are going to play to an audience. Now, when you record sound or equate voice, the sound of a truck, a cat meow, a dog bark, a violin. All of those can kind of be recorded and placed in the same composition and then played back. So the phonograph really paved the way for sound art to kind of be developed in the first two artists that we'll look at. So sound art dates back to the early inventions of Luigi Russolo, who between 1913 and 1930 built these noise machines that replicated the clatter of industrial age boom and kind of mechanical sounds and reproductions. And he believed that a range of sounds could be kind of appreciated aesthetically. So this is his Intonomori instrument, and he used this for a number of Brutism kind of music works, and it partly operated on electricity. So I'm going to show you a clip of one of his works using that machine in a moment. So Luigi Russolo was an Italian futurist painter and composer, and he was the builder of these kind of experimental musical instruments that could kind of generate noise. And he's the author of this manifesto, which was really a kind of letter to a colleague of his, another kind of futurist artist. And it's called The Art of Noises, published in 1913. And in this book, he argued that the human ear had become accustomed to speed, energy, and noise of the new industrial soundscape. So, previously music was understood as kind of happening in a vacuum, but now with the kind of the Industrial Revolution and the prevalence of machines and technology and cars, the ear had been accustomed to a new kind of soundscape. And sound works and kind of music, because really Luigi Russolo was a composer, and sound art as a genre had not been developed yet. So he's was arguing that in kind of music, these kind of new machine sounds had to be incorporated because that was responding to the moment. This seminal text influenced the development of concrete music and heavily influenced the work of John Cage, which we'll talk about in a moment. So he's arguing for a kind of reimagination of the senses, and that music does not have to be kind of pleasurable or organized in this kind of harmonious way, but rather should respond to the soundscape of the moment. So in his Brutism pieces, there would be kind of musical instruments, but also sound from the gas inside metallic pipes, engines, cars, pistols, machines operating, the train tracks, noises from trains running on a track. All of these would be incorporated into kind of one sound work. He was also a painter, so I thought I would kind of just show one of his works. This is Tower Bridge from 1929. So now I'll play a piece by Luigi Russolo, and I'll only play, how long is this? I think it's a few minutes. I'll play 1 minute just, to account for your senses. So here we go. Luigi Russolo performed works like this from 1913 to 1914 in Italy, and then after World War II in Paris. And his most notable work was in 1921, which sounded very similar to this. So then in the next video, we'll look at the work of John Cage. So we'll move from the 1920s to the 1940s and 50s.